You asked and we're delivering. Today, I'm giving up my role as podcast host and I'm getting interviewed. Let's get started.
Hello, I'm Atta Yaqub, actor and presenter, and in this DemocraTEA end of year special, I have Anum Qaisar in the hot seat to speak about her journey from politics and personal life, faith and culture, visibility and retreat. Her experiences in life which have given her challenges, but also some real cherishable moments. It is not a redemption arc or a victory lap, it is an honest stocktake of what it means to build a life in public, to lose and begin again, and to keep choosing truth over comfort. I'll be asking her what drives her and what motivates her, but also what is really impacting society and our communities. And like all our DemocraTEA conversations, we will be spilling the tea on people, power and politics. Anum, thank you very much for having me question you on DemocraTEA. Thank you and welcome.
Oh, it's normally me saying that to someone.
Listen, it's a takeover
quite
today.
Strange being welcomed to my own podcast,
Good.
But thank you for having me.
I'm honoured and privileged, not only because of who you are and what you've done, but I think today is a real chance for me just to ask about you, a bit about your journey. Don't be nervous about it. And I think
nervous.
I think this is the whole point of people wanting to hear and listen and watch who you are. So, you know, and there's a lot I know about you. There's a lot I don't. So I'm really hoping today is about that. So thanks for having me. Thanks for bringing me my DemocraTEA as well. What are you having?
So actually, Atta, I've just copied you. I have been making fun of you for the last wee while for your tea choices. Yeah. I think it was the other day you messaged me and said, get me a healthy tea.
I know.
So I have taken inspiration from you, and is it strawberry and raspberry we're drinking today?
Very nice.
So
and you can smell the essence already, can't you?
You can. And actually that's quite relaxing.
I know.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But normally I am a desi chai kind of girl.
Oh, are you?
I love desi chai, but like properly like made in the house, not the stuff that you get outside in shops that's full of sugar. Right.
So you've said made in the house. So does that make you a bit of a homely girl? And what was your upbringing like?
Yeah, that's a great segue.
I know.
I think I'm going to learn so much from you today in terms of how to interview. I think people maybe think I have this like really glamorous life where I'm always out and about, and alhamdulillah for the opportunities that I'm afforded. Yeah. But honestly, nothing makes me happier than being at home. So my best friend, or one of my really good friends, Amy, always laughs and says, I'll be the first person if we're going out to say, where's the after party? Which is like every single time and when we go out, bang on 10 o'clock, you're like,
I want to go home.
Right, I want to go home now. So yeah, I think people maybe think I'm like really out there, and I do like going out and stuff. I think everyone does, but definitely like home is where comfort is.
I like that. Home is where the comfort is. And what was it like growing up in Glasgow for you? Where did you grow up, and who was in your family, and what was the real influences within your family? Yeah,
so I was born in Edinburgh. Actually, if I take it a couple of generations back, my Nana Abu, so my maternal grandfather, moved to Rochdale in the 1960s from rural Punjab, and then a couple of years later, he sent over my Nani Ami, so my grandmother, and there are 5 kids. And then they lived in Rochdale, and then that's where my mum was born. And it was like in the mid to late 70s where they decided to move up to Edinburgh. They'd been up, or my uncles had been up for work, and they just really liked Scotland. So moved up to Edinburgh in the 70s. And then, that's where I was born. And then I've lived across kind of central belt of Scotland. Also lived in Irvine. I grew up there for a bit, and in Kilmarnock.
Right. And so you've mentioned your nanny and your grandma. How much of an influence did she play? Because was she here or was she in Pakistan but came back and forth, right?
Yeah, no, so she was over here. So she lived in Edinburgh and then laterally in East Kilbride towards the end of her life. And she was a phenomenal woman. And it's so interesting because I think nowadays we talk about like strong women. And, you know, alhamdulillah, like mashallah, women are doing so much these days. But see that generation of women, Atta, that came, they left everything all their comforts, they left their homelands, moved halfway across the country. So many of them got on one-way flights to the UK and built a life here. And actually, I find it incredibly frustrating when you have the likes of Nigel Farage and the far right who demonise the contributions of people of colour in this country. But then I think back to my nanny who came here, worked incredibly hard, and she left everything in Pakistan.
And it's interesting, I know you've mentioned some right-wing politics here, and we'll come to that because I want to hear more about some of that when we do talk about your politics journey. But going back to your gran and empowering, and you're saying working, she seems to have passed on a lot of those values to yourself because you're a young woman, you're successful, you're driven, all these kind of attributes. Has that been driven from your mum and from your gran? And why is that so important in today's society?
Yeah, I mean, I think you know the phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. I think that's definitely like the epitome of my life, where it's not necessarily been one person that's influenced me. It's not been my mum solely or my dad solely. It has been, you know, multiple family members. And I always talk about the contribution of my nannies, so my gran, my daddy, my dad's mum, and the elders in my family and the older women in my family.
Yeah. And then that, I guess that value that they, and the principles that they embed on you and your family is kind of what makes you who you are, because, you know, you're a Scottish, Muslim, Pakistani, you've come from Edinburgh and you're doing all this really, really amazing work. Why is that important that that message around women empowerment continues for the coming generations and this current generation?
Oh my goodness, it's so important. And I find it incredibly frustrating where women of colour are often told that we are not good enough, or sometimes we feel like we have to try harder than other communities because of racism, Islamophobia, or multiple other forms of discrimination. And I mean, I don't know what contribution I'm going to make in my life or what contribution I have made in my life. But the one thing I always say to myself is, you know, inshallah, if one other girl, at least one other girl can look at me and think, if she can do it, so can I, then, you know, alhamdulillah, then that's me.
No,
that's
definitely.
me, done something. And actually, one of the really lovely stories I've got from Parliament is shortly after I was elected, a wee girl got in touch with me, and her name is Anum. And she spelt it the exact same way as I spell my name. And she was only 7 years old, and she was like, I think it's so cool that you're in Parliament. You've got the same name as me. You look like me. And I think I've already often talked about role models and the importance of role models. But for me, at that point, I was like, oh, wow, like I might actually make a difference. And I don't know if I have, but I might actually make a difference. And that idea of at least one other girl sees me, inshallah, it'll give her. And that doesn't necessarily mean that she has to enter politics, because politics is a tough gig.
Yes.
But, you know, whatever field they choose, you know, inshallah, there'll be more and more.
Definitely. I like that, inshallah. And so you talked about, you know, you've spoken a little bit about you growing up and the influence. What were some of the challenges you faced? Not. I don't want to speak of your politics challenges or life challenges, but just growing up in the 90s, in the noughties, as someone with all this going on, but wanting to make their mark somewhere and not quite knowing where that was. Because you mentioned that young girl there who looked at you as a role model. Who was it, apart from your gran, that you seen as a role model, and what were some of the challenges that you were facing?
Yeah, I mean, so I very often talk about the fact that when I was growing up, I didn't really feel like I had role models. And for me, and this might sound really weird because I was an SNP MP, but for me, when I realised actually I can do something is when I saw in 2010 Saida Varsi stand outside 10 Downing Street in her iconic shalwar kameez, and she was appointed to cabinet, so she was the first Muslim to be appointed. Before that, in Gordon Brown's government, you'd had Shahid Malik, who was Minister for International Development, but Saida was the first person to be elected in cabinet, or appointed rather to cabinet. And I just found that fascinating, because that Atta was the first time I had seen someone who looked like me, maybe not sound like me because she's from Yorkshire, but someone that looked like me in a position of power. But actually, even if we peel it back a wee bit, you know, when I was growing up and watching television, I don't remember seeing people that looked like me on TV. I don't remember Oh my goodness, I mean, I talk about this quite often, maybe not publicly, but one of the struggles that I had growing up is, so I love magazines.
Yeah.
And this generation might not know the love of magazines.
What magazines have you loved?
So it's like all like the teen ones, and I was obsessed with Sabrina the Teenage Witch, right? Okay. And then I was also obsessed with Harry Potter. I think the fact that I'm a muggle is really disappointing. I should have studied at Hogwarts. But anyways, when I was growing up, I absolutely loved magazines.
Okay.
And it's that like constant reminder that you don't look the same as everyone else. Yeah. And for me, that constant reminder was that when I was flicking through those magazines, the standard of beauty was not Asian women. The standard of beauty was Caucasian girls with blonde hair and blue eyes. And that for me definitely gave me a complex when I was growing up. And I don't talk about that very often publicly, but then when I speak to other girls, or especially other Asian girls of my generation, of my age, it seems to be this universal experience that we all had in our households, and that definitely had an impact on me. So you've got like the big picture stuff, like the political stuff, not seeing anyone, and then finally seeing Saida, but then all the way through to growing up and flicking through magazines and not seeing someone
like
that
you.
looked at
really
like me.
Interesting.
And actually I remember, and you might judge me for this, but I'm obsessed with Bridgerton, right? Okay. Oh, biggest Bridgerton fan going. And I remember watching it and thinking it was so fascinating, but also so wholesome and so healing, seeing so many people of colour in that programme, but not added on as the token brown person. It
was about them, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was about them, about their lives, especially season 2 with Cantony.
Yeah. Okay, no, listen, this is great to know and see. I love the fact that you went back to some of those magazines growing up and how you couldn't see someone that was like you. And you've mentioned politics a number of times, but is that what you wanted to be? What was your, when you went into uni and college or after school, did you think, I want to be a politician? What was your career aspirations? It's
something that people might not know about me is my birthday. So it's actually the 11th of September. And so the day after, I experienced a fair bit of Islamophobia and racism. I mean, if I think back to the 9/11, I turned 9 that day. And I went home and I remember one of my cousins seeing one of my cousin's cars outside and thinking, presents. So at the age of 9, that's all I cared about was presents and cake. And I didn't really know what had happened. And I go into the house and this was our old house. And I very distinctly remember my mum standing at the doorway between the living room and the kitchen, watching television and crying and being really, really upset. And I was like, Mum, what's happening? Like, I'm your eldest child. I'm your favourite child.
Just back home.
I'm back home. It's my birthday. Why are you not giving me attention? Yeah. But my mum was really, really upset. And so I started asking God. And I was only 9 years old. So she was careful with what she said to me. But she explained that there'd been a terrorist attack in New York. And it was really sad. And lots of people had lost their lives. And then I remember asking my mum, like, is this going to happen here in Scotland? And she's like, no, it won't. And it won't really have that much of an impact on us here. But, well, exactly.
The biggest impact.
Famous last words. But, don't worry too much about this. I then go to school the next day and I'm asked, are my family terrorists? Told I'm a Paki, told my skin colour is dirty, and experienced a lot of racism and Islamophobia. But the thing was, I was 9 years old. Like, I didn't know what racism and Islamophobia was. I mean, I had brown skin. At night time, I'd have like roti salad for dinner. And my friends would have me like pizzas and other stuff. Or I would go to masjid in the evening to learn the Quran and they'd go to Sunday school. But see, in the grand scheme of things...
It's almost contained, wasn't it? We couldn't see out with that our community.
But also, like, I was Scottish as anyone else. Like, I didn't see myself as different, even though I literally had brown skin. I didn't see myself as any different. And for me, that, I would say, was like a defining factor in my life. But I actually think that's for most people of my generation who are South Asian or who are Muslim, who grew up in the Western world.
Absolutely. Remember, my name is Atta, and the guy who committed some of these atrocities was Muhammad Atta. So I remember going into school and university or wherever I was at that point in my life, because I'm way older than you. They were like, oh, Atta, that's the same guy. So my name started to have a real big significance that I'd never even thought about. I used to be called Asli Atta, Roti Atta, all of those things. But when they started saying Atta as in the person who did that, it literally was the day that changed so many lives for so many Muslims, and you've just alluded to that. It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, it's so interesting because I now look at what's happening with the genocide in Gaza, and I think that's repeating itself. And what I mean by that is, I think for Muslims growing up in the UK of my generation, of our generation, sorry, because you're not that much older than me, you've got two kind of defining factors. You've got the 9/11, 7/7 to an extent as well, and now the genocide in Gaza. And I think at these points, we felt that marked difference. And I mean, we've seen now, I don't know if it's as a consequence of the genocide in Gaza and Muslims and people of colour or people who are visibly Muslim being more vocal, but we're now also seeing a rise in far right rhetoric and this kind of anti-immigration stance from punters on the street all the way through to government. And that's really scary, man, because I think how much my life changed after 9/11 and, you know, people like you and most of us. And I see that replicating itself to an extent with the genocide in Gaza.
Completely agree. And it's an all-time high. And again, like I've said before, I think we'll come to some of that in specific, but I want to go back to you and your profession and what you wanted to do, because it wasn't straight from there as a 9-year-old straight into politics. There's been a journey, you know, and I want the listeners, the viewers, whoever tunes into DemocraTEA.
It'll just be my mum, to be honest.
No, not at all. To hear about some of that, please, because it doesn't go from there to there. There's a bit of a process. So tell us a little bit about, you know, what happened after school, what you got into, and then how did it become politics?
So I studied politics at the University of Stirling, which are some of my happiest memories. I don't know if you know Stirling Uni Campus.
I worked there at the Garricky Sports Centre. Yes,
of course you did, because that's where we first met.
Yes, exactly.
All those years ago when I was at uni. You probably don't remember this, but I do, because fun fact, when I saw you, I was like, oh my God, that's that actor from A Kiss. And my friends were like, who? And I was like, no, that's a famous actor. And they're like, please don't embarrass yourself and ask for an autograph.
No.
I should maybe ask for an autograph today.
No, listen.
But I didn't all those years ago. So I studied, politics at the University of Stirling, which honestly are some of my happiest memories. Like, I coasted through uni. Like, I hope my dad's not watching this, because he's going to not be happy. But yeah, I coasted through uni. I chilled. I had the best time. I made lifelong friends. Brilliant. And it was really, really nice.
And what were you wanting to do then? What were you wanting to get into?
I'm really lucky that my parents didn't put pressure on me, like, you have to be a lawyer or you have to be a doctor or you have to be an engineer. They knew I was always really interested in politics from that kind of defining factor of when I turned 9 years old. And I always used to like watch the current affairs and read newspapers. So politics was I was really interested in that. And then after, I wasn't too sure what I wanted to do. So I actually started the graduate entry LLB at the University of Glasgow. Yes. But I just didn't enjoy that at all. And that was a really difficult conversation to have with my parents. To say, look, I graduated from politics. I wanted to study law, but I just hated it. I love the thought of being like Jessica Pearson in Suits. But like, see the reality of studying law, like...
See all the programmes that you're rhyming off there. You're going to end up in TV and production. I know it. From Bridgerton to Suits, all of this. I'm hearing you. But
I absolutely loved Suits. I don't think Suits was out back then, but I just loved the idea of like being a lawyer. But it was just so dry, like so dry. And one thing about me is, see if I find content, like as in like written content, just really, really dry, I'm really going to struggle to.
It has to keep you motivated, invigorated, alive.
I mean, but also like something I can relate to, I suppose, as well. And I mean, I enjoyed aspects of law, but I just wasn't for me.
Wasn't for you. Okay.
So that wasn't my thing. I knew that. And then it was 2014.
Okay.
And obviously in 2014 for us in Scotland, that was a big year because we went to the ballot box to decide whether we wanted Scotland to be an independent nation. Now, I was actually a member of the Labour Party and was planning to vote no.
Wow.
I know.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, and actually I am. Don't tell many people this, but it's public knowledge. I also used to work for an AS server.
Okay.
So I interned in his office back when I was about 18, 19. Right. And actually, I've got a lot of love for Anas, and on a personal level, we get on really, really well. And I'm really grateful for the opportunities that he gave me back when I was 18, 19 years old and interning. And I learned so much from that process and really learned actually frontline what a politician does and attended, constituency surgeries and helped write press briefings.
Because that's something people don't know enough is the process. People just think, do you know what, they start here and they end up at, Scottish Member of Parliament, or they're not. Tell us a little bit about that process, because it's not easy. And we want people who are listening and watching to know the process. And also we want people to get involved. We need to galvanise our communities to do something that is making change, right? So what was that process? You talked about surgeries and constituencies. What does that mean? And how did that then ultimately lead you from Labour to SNP and then a Member of Parliament? Yeah,
so a surgery is where a Member of Parliament or an MSP or a councillor, basically an elected politician, will advertise time for a constituent to come and speak to them. And actually they can come speak to them about any issue that's impacting them. So from Anas's working, and during that time working for Anas, I really learned the actual process of what politicians do. But obviously I was still really, really young, only 18, 19. Then fast forward a couple of years, get to 2014, and I actually decided to join the Yes campaign, but as a member of the Labour Party.
Okay.
So that was quite controversial.
Could you do that then?
I mean, but it was difficult as well because I had made a lot of friends in the Labour Party. And
who were going to be sticking to the no, I'm guessing.
Yes. Okay. And so when I turned around and said I was actually going to vote yes for an independent Scotland, I wasn't exactly flavour of the month. And I got a lot of flack for that. And there's still people, older Uncle G's in the Glasgow Asian community who if I saw, I would say Islam, because in Islam you have to say Assalamu alaikum and be polite. And I would quite happily walk away from them. Because they were incredibly rude. And bear in mind, I was like 20, 21 at the time.
And female.
And
Muslim. And Pakistani. And someone who's finding their feet there, but now you've got this extra added pressure from your own community. Yeah,
and they just weren't happy that I had gone against the Labour Party. So that was really difficult, actually, at that time. And I remember thinking, like, oh my goodness, is this actually what politics is like? It's really tough. And again, I wasn't elected at that point.
Yes.
I was just a punter saying, Labour Party member, but I'm going to vote yes for an independent Scotland. Then campaigned for the referendum. I obviously Scotland voted no, and then I ended up working for an MP and MSP, and then I got sick of politics and went into teaching.
And so when you ended up working for an MP and MSP, was that still in the Labour Party then?
No, so that was SNP. Yeah, so after the 2014 referendum, actually a week after the referendum, I joined the SNP. Nicola Sturgeon wrote about it in her book, and she actually technically gets it wrong. Because I joined the SNP a week after the referendum. It wasn't necessarily the referendum that was the tipping point. It was a contributing factor. But for me, the tipping point was a week after the referendum, there was a vote in the House of Commons on strikes in the Middle East. And I can't remember off the top of my head what country it was. And the Labour Party and the Tories joined hand in hand to vote for these strikes. And SNP MPs voted. I can't remember if they voted against or they abstained. I think they voted against. And for me, foreign policy is really important. And again, that obviously stems from growing up at a time of 9/11, the Iraq War, 7/7. So foreign policy is incredibly important to me, and seeing the Labour Party join hands with the Tories to vote for airstrikes was just something that I couldn't really get my head around. And I thought, this is not something that I want to be part of. Then joined the SNP.
So again, sticking to your principles and values of what again had come from your gran essentially and your family, to show that message of empowerment, of believing and doing what you think is right. You stuck to that mantra. So I love that. I'm going back a little bit because you mentioned teaching, and you mentioned that after that referendum part of it, you went to work for an MSP, then an MP, or vice versa. Then you got into teaching. Tell us about how that manifested itself.
Yeah, oh my goodness, I just got sick of politics. Like, politics is draining. Even at that point, like, obviously I wasn't elected, but I was working for parliamentarians, and like, it takes over your life, man. Like, it really does.
And how is that? Is that just with the volume of papers or things you need to deal with? How does it take over your life?
I suppose then it was a choice that I made that it took over my life. But 9 to 5, I was working in a politician's office. And then in the evening or at the weekends, I was out campaigning for the SNP because I was a card-carrying member of the SNP.
What's card-carrying member?
So as in like, I was a paid-up member.
Okay.
I was a paid-up member of the SNP. So then there was always like elections, and I stood in the council election in 2017. So there was constantly something that was happening.
Yep.
So I just felt like I was working, not for the SNP, but SNP policy influenced my MPs and MSPs work. And then in the evenings and the weekends, I was still doing SNP stuff. And, you know... No life. I mean,
so
one would argue I still don't have a life.
This thing you said right at the start, or people think glamorous this, glamorous that. There's no life there, so it's hard to be glamorous, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's a hard slog. And don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed it. And I love like knocking on doors and chatting to folk. And I think people probably know that I'm quite chatty, so quite like having a conversation. But yeah, it got a lot. So ended up going into teaching, and I studied the PGDE at the University of Strathclyde to be a modern studies teacher. And actually, fun fact, don't know if you know this, you don't get modern studies in England.
Oh, do you know what do they call it? Politics
so they just have like politics, or I actually don't know what they would call it. I think it's just like general studies.
I think we're on 3 fun facts already. I like this. So they
a fun fact.
They don't get modern studies there. So you became a modern studies teacher. Were you teaching then for a while?
Yeah, so I was teaching through in Edinburgh, certificated classes from first year all the way through to 6th year.
Okay. All right, I love it. I'm putting the jigsaw pieces together. But I want to keep going back and forth now. We're on politics in terms of your journey. You mentioned some of the knocking on the doors and everything, and this and that would have brought its own challenges. What was it like becoming an MP then?
Oh my goodness, like I think people think you just get elected, and there's a hard slog behind it. And I think I absolutely love, as I just said, chatting to folk and speaking and having conversations. But ultimately, what you're doing then as a candidate or an activist is you're knocking on a door. You don't know who's behind that door. You don't know what reaction they're going to have, whether they're going to be positive, whether they're going to be ambivalent, or whether they're going to be really rude. And you need to convince them.
And you're female.
And I'm female, and I'm brown. And I'm not visibly Muslim, but with a name like Anum Qaisar, I think people can probably connect the dots.
Yep.
And you have to convince them to believe what you believe. And I mean, when I think back to the 2021 election, if you remember kind of May 2021, we were still in the pandemic and we weren't in the lockdown necessarily, but there were still quite strict rules. And actually, if I think back to that election, one of the things that brings me a lot of joy remembering is how many people would stop me and say, see that Nicola Sturgeon, she was fantastic during the pandemic. And I mean, it's no secret that I'm a Nicola Sturgeon fangirl, but she was brilliant during the pandemic. And you know, which political leader wants to be faced with a global pandemic and trying to get their country through that? And, you know, during the 2021 election, that was the topic of conversation in everyone's door, is how great Nicola was. And I think then this is like another level of politics that maybe people don't understand. The reality is that people aren't necessarily voting for the candidate. There's a small percentage of people in each constituency that will vote for a candidate on a personal level, whether they know of the work that they've done or whether they know them through family, friends. The reality and the harsh reality of politics is that it doesn't really matter what you as a person have done. More often than not, it's about the global, or like the national level of politics and where your party's polling nationally. And I mean, myself and my colleagues in the SNP, who were SNP MPs, were all victim to that in the 2024 general election when we were reduced from 40 odd seats down to 9. Of course.
And it's had a huge impact since 2024 and where you're at. You spoke about some of the challenges of, it's not about you, it's about the party, it's about what's going on locally, nationally, around the world. What other challenges then have you faced in being a politician, being a member of parliament? Because I've seen you, front and centre asking questions that are really relevant to me as a Muslim, but also to a wider community, about the genocide and about other things. That's not easy as well. And it's not easy to get an audience to around some of that. We spoke about the process at the start about joining. What's the process of, once you're in there, to have some of the kind of nuances within politics as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting, right? I think, so I was very vocal and still am on the genocide in Gaza, and I don't think that's necessarily because I'm brown. I don't think that's necessarily because I'm Muslim. It's just because it's a genocide and we should all be speaking out against it. It's horrifying. But actually, if we go a few years before that, when I was elected in May 2021, my very first question in the chamber was a couple of weeks later, and I stood up and asked Liz Truss, who was then Secretary of State for International Trade. I'm just trying to remember all the different...
You wouldn't have got a good answer anyway.
Well, I never. But I asked her about arms sales to Israel.
Okay.
And again, that wasn't because necessarily I was Muslim. It wasn't necessarily because I was brown. It was because that's something that's really important to me as a person. And, you know, foreign policy is important to me. But also, I think a country should take a moral and compassionate and humane stance when it sees, you know, atrocities being occurred. And, you know, that was really difficult. But yeah, I stood to my guns, and that was my first question. And then I actually had the opportunity to visit the occupied West Bank in 2023, just a couple of months before October the 7th, which was a fascinating experience, really, really informative, but also really, really tragic to see that. So that's the kind of things that I was interested in. Yeah. But one of the things that I really struggled with, I don't think I struggled with it, but maybe people struggle to understand this, is that I think there's not really much space for nuance in politics in 2025. It often feels like everything's like really clickbaity and you have to have one view or another view, and there's no space in the middle. And so a lot of like abuse that I got, for example, was being told that I was the Member of Parliament for Gaza, or that I remember one of the speeches I made, I said that, you know, bombs were getting thrown on schools and hospitals, and someone had written, "I hope a bomb goes on you."
Oh God.
And I mean, that's horrific.
How do you deal with that? Like, how does a person deal with something like that around being so personally attacked when all you're trying to do is look out for humanity?
Yeah, but also then, like, what really frustrates me in that scenario is I don't have to have binary choices, and politics isn't about binary choices. I can care about the genocide in Gaza just as much as I care about child poverty. And I think, again, in 2025, and this rhetoric I don't think is helped by the far right, we can care about multiple issues simultaneously. But one of the levels or accusations that were leveled at me was that I only cared about Gaza or Muslim issues. And I mean, but then also I would argue more often than not, it falls upon Muslims. It falls upon, you know, people who are from the LGBTQI plus community. It falls upon disabled people, falls upon people who are neurodivergent to raise their own concerns, because the reality is that the rest of the world's dealing with their own thing and they don't necessarily think about what's impacting you. Yeah, no.
Really, really important, the fact that we think of that wider inclusion aspect rather than just that. And just going on to that inclusion aspect before we go back to the right wing, this intersectional, understanding and natural approach you've got to looking at people, women, you know, you're looking at Muslim, you're looking at Pakistani. How important is that, the fact that you're so well-rounded in terms of understanding those different needs? How did that, and how has that helped you in your career and also in your politics?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I would probably just say to people is that I actually don't care what they think, and I'm very, very comfortable. And I think that comes across. I'm very comfortable with my nationality. Yeah, with my nationality, my faith and my ethnicity. I actually always laugh and say, I'm a Scottish Pakistani Muslim, and during the holy month of Ramadan, you'll find me eating a spicy curry with a cold can of fine brew. But that is just the reality of my life. And alhamdulillah, like, I'm really grateful for the upbringing that I had. But I also think it's incumbent on people like you and I who are in the public eye to talk about that, because it's easy to stay quiet. It's really easy to stay quiet. It's really easy not to make yourself look different. It's really easy to assimilate and try and be like everyone else as much as possible.
But then people will argue, right? And listen, I'm in the kind of TV film industry as well as a couple others. But people argue, if you do stay quiet, will you not get further if you do stay quiet and go with what that is? Or should you continue to challenge? Because our young people who will be listening or might not be listening, but we're hoping that this conversation, this podcast, DemocraTEA, does reach out to others, our young people who are afraid of talking about their identity, and you've just said you're very comfortable with who you are. How can we change and influence them more?
Yeah, I mean, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it, right? And I think I would say to people is knowing your place, and I know that sounds really weird, but bear with me. The reality is not everyone's going to be an elected politician.
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone's going to be an actor. But we've got scope to understand who we are and what our boundaries are. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go kicking and blazing and screaming about it, but you can work quietly as well in different ways. That doesn't necessarily mean that you are quiet,
Yeah.
you're just working quietly. And I think that's the message I'd pass on to everyone, because the reality is that not everyone's going to be a member of parliament, or not everyone's going to be an actor, but they might work in law, or they might work in finance, or they might work in shops and retail, or they might be a taxi driver. And there's scope for everyone
to have that voice, essentially.
Yeah, to have that voice, but also then to understand what their own boundaries are as well, because I would never push someone to be maybe as vocal as I am.
Listen, and keep it up. I know we spoke about the far right earlier on in terms of the rise of the far right. Do you think, where are we with that? Because there's real danger, there's real worry that the far right will have more seats next year in Scotland when the Scottish elections happen. They're already having a huge impact in England. Where are we with the far right, and how worried should we be?
Incredibly worried, incredibly worried.
Because it's not just a phase, is it? It's the discussions everywhere you look now. I mean, Farage got primetime TV on Jungle a few years ago. That was just him warming up to say to everyone, I'll be on your screens sooner rather than later. Like, every element of media and industries have got a part to play in this. You know, where are we at with it all?
Also then, like, it's actually really scary on a more local level. So there was a by-election in the Whitburn area. Yep. So is that West Lothian?
West Lothian,
I was about to say East Lothian and get my geography terribly wrong. Fun fact, I used to teach geography. Clearly wasn't very good at it. Yeah, so there was a by-election in West Lothian recently, and Reform won. And
it was a Labour seat, I believe, and SNP came second.
Yeah, SNP did really well, and our candidate was absolutely brilliant. And this is no reflection on him as a candidate, but it's a reflection on how normalised it has become to be able to say things that people would not have said 10 years ago. And so it was Baroness Side of RC who said a number of years ago that Islamophobia has passed the dinner table test. So this idea that you can talk about Islamophobia or be Islamophobic over the dinner table, but you know, we have gone way beyond that.
Yeah.
The normalisation of anti-immigrant, anti-brown, anti-Muslim rhetoric has become so normalised. It's absolutely terrifying. And the worry that I have and the concern I have is that political parties are just letting reform be because they're seeing that there's going to be electoral gain for them. Now, that might not make sense, but bear with me. If you take Scotland, for example, traditionally in Scotland, we'd have two-party seats in constituencies. So you'd have the SNP versus Labour. But actually, what you're now seeing is a third party. Yeah. So now you can't call it between two parties. Even at the general election last year, Labour won, and in my seat of Airdrie and Shotts, Labour won, SNP came second, and Reform were third, then Tories were way behind. And that's now become much more common, and we've seen that with the by-election earlier this year. Christina McKelvey, a fantastic former SNP MSP, sadly passed away. And there was a by-election in her seat.
That's right.
And Reform did really, really well. And that was just a couple of months ago. We've now seen Reform win a by-election. So what, in my view, the worry is that political parties might become complacent because they think that votes are going to split so that they can maybe come through the middle. And I mean, again, it's not the done thing to talk about this publicly because everyone's like, oh no, we're all against reform, and I can understand that. But actually, that is a worry for myself and for other people that I speak to, that there's some electoral gain for some political parties if reform do well, because they're on one side of the political spectrum and maybe other political parties on the other side.
It makes it that two thing again, doesn't it?
Yeah. And then another part of it is that Reform's a unionist party, and so are they going to like split the unionist vote? Then what impact does that have on the SNP? Does the SNP gain from that electorally? And I know it's a really weird thing to say, but it's a question that we need to ask. And John Swinney is First Minister, and I mean, I'm going to put my hands up. I'm a former SNP MSP, so obviously I'm going to speak highly of John Swinney, but he has done a really good job in challenging reform. But I am worried that not everyone in political parties really truly understands the worry. That's the political aspect of it. Yeah. And, we're talking about seats and votes, but there's a human element.
Absolutely.
And that's
that localized version of it.
That look like me and you. How does that feel? And I mean, that's really scary. And I think back to the general election last year when I was voting and when I was campaigning and when I was speaking to people indoors, and people would tell me they're voting reform. So during the general election last year, I would knock on their door, they would tell me they were voting reform, and I would look at them and think, you can see the colour of my skin.
And did they give reasons and stuff like that? Because as soon as I think of reform, I think of all the talk about is immigration, whereas the narrative from political parties should be around cost of living, about how, we want to change unemployment, health, etc. So are people not aware of this, or are not wanting to find out? Or are they ignorant? Because if you're turning up at a door and they say, I'm voting reform, surely they are
They're looking at me and thinking, she's a brown girl, and she sounds Scottish, but surely her family have immigrated to this country. But they're just so brazen that they're voting reform. And, that's really difficult. And again, I think the political discourse is all around the political aspect and the votes and the seats, but there's a real human cost. And I mean, if I'm speaking to someone and they say, I'm voting reform, or I support reform, or I empathise with Nigel Farage's viewpoints, like, it sends shivers down my spine.
And do you think people are being open now?
Oh, definitely. And I mean, people are really open with the fact that they're voting reform. And, it's such a lazy argument to say, oh, I'm voting reform because I don't believe that we should have immigrants, or there's too many immigrants. But actually, again, this is what really frustrates me about politics, is if we take a step back and look at the population rate in Scotland, we have a declining birth rate in this country. We need immigration in Scotland. That's not me saying this as a brown person whose family immigrated to this country.
No, of course not.
The stats show us that Scotland needs immigration to survive, to thrive, and to prosper as a nation. Immigrants come to this country, and we talk about the doctors, and we talk about the NHS and the social workers, but then we also have people who have immigrated to this country, who've had kids, and they've, got businesses, or they're teachers, or they're lawyers, or they're accountants. Like, immigrants are so embedded in Scottish society and Scottish culture, and they're so needed. And it's just such a frustrating argument when people say that there's too much immigration.
Completely agree.
That might be the case in some parts of England. I'm not convinced it is, but it might be. But it's simply not the case in Scotland. And can you tell I get really, really frustrated? I get really, really frustrated by this.
We need to, and you need to have that voice, and we need to use platforms like this and other platforms that we're in to really voice that opinion. My question is right around some of that. And listen, I'm talking as someone who is just playing devil's advocate here. So if the government have put in a policy around, if you're coming in and here's a hotel, for example, to stay in, but there's homeless people in the streets that are from a Scottish background, whatever, are they educating enough around why they're doing this or what that process is? Because sometimes I feel they're not, right? So the people who aren't sure which way to vote are going to say, government's doing this, and they're really easy to get to by parties like Reform. So what can the government do to change some of that understanding to the normal person?
The reality is, if you're a Scottish person who's homeless, and if you're an asylum seeker who's fled a Middle Eastern country, for example, you're going to have more in common with each other than the likes of Nigel Farage. And I mean, we can talk about the government not challenging this enough, but also media has a big responsibility here, and the rhetoric in the media isn't helpful or supportive. But also, we need more politicians to be saying this as well. And we put that responsibility on government 100%. But you've got other political parties in Scotland who should be saying this more. I mean, the Lib Dems, the Labour Party, the Tories, I think, are trying to out-reform at this point. You've got the Greens. So you've got other political entities who can also use their voice. And I'm just not convinced that they're wanting to do that because, again, they don't want to alienate some of these people because they want their votes. So
you were in the shadow cabinet, is that right?
Yep, that's correct.
And when you're an MP like that, what's it like to be an MP, and who decides in the chamber what types of questions are asked?
Yeah, so oh my goodness, there's so much there that I can talk about. First of all, if we look at kind of shadow cabinet, so I was shadow minister for international trade, then I was shadow minister for international development, and then I was shadow secretary of state for levelling up. And basically what that means is that you've got government ministers, then you've got the Labour Party shadow cabinet, and because the SNP, my party, were third party, we also had a shadow cabinet and shadow spokespeople. So in the chamber, when anything was discussed...
When you say chamber, you're talking...
The House of Commons chamber. So like those iconic green benches.
Yep.
So anytime anyone was speaking about levelling up, I'd be told to go in and I would have to speak to those debates and ask questions around those. You know, it's a really weird one because I suppose as humans, we all have like our own interest areas. So when I was first elected, I told then leader Ian Blackford that I was really interested in foreign policy.
Yep.
And like for me, foreign policy was like very, very much like borders between countries and the political aspect. But then when I got made Shadow Minister for International Development, I really found a love for overseas aid, which is not really something that I was particularly interested before. And so I was really interested in international development and specifically in kind of looking at positive outcomes for women and girls in the global south.
Wow. And did you have a few countries that they focused on, or was that just globally?
So it was international development globally.
Super.
So, I mean, I spoke on debates from, oh my God, I'm trying to think of random countries now that I spoke on. But yeah, I spoke on loads of different debates. And actually, as part of that, I then also visited countries as well. So I went to Ethiopia with the United Nations, so with UNICEF. And we went to the south of Ethiopia to learn more about UNICEF programmes around malnutrition in young children and babies. Met with mothers and spoke to them because it's a very colonialist attitude to say you can't have babies or use contraception, because the reality is that they might not use contraception for a variety of different reasons. So it was really interesting to go out with UNICEF and see what they were doing on specifically malnutrition.
Interesting.
And then, as I said earlier, I'd also went out to the occupied West Bank as well. So I did a lot on kind of shadow cabinet. That was really, really interesting. I really enjoyed it.
I'm building up the portfolio of the types of jobs you'll be able to do.
Yeah.
And this international diplomat is one that's going to, I'm going to add to the list. I've added that.
Added that to the list.
I've added that to the list.
Do.
But just on that, in terms of when you're in the chamber and you've told me about all the different types of roles that you had, because that was unknown to me. But see, when you're in the chamber and there's a vote, how does the vote process happen? Because we all see that on TV and it looks like carnage. But surely there's a bit of a system going on there, right?
No, there's no system. It is carnage. So if you think about it, you've got like the Speaker of the House of Commons who's in the middle, and then they go, ayes to the right.
Yes.
So basically what happens is, again, this is so interesting because I never knew this, even though as a politics teacher, you would think that every single piece of legislation that goes through Parliament gets voted on. It doesn't. No. Actually, more often than not, chief whips, who are like, basically you've got the leaders of political parties, but your chief whip is the person who like tells you what we're voting on and how we're going to vote. The chief whips from all the political parties will meet. They will have discussions, and in between them, they'll say, we're going to contest this vote, or we're going to contest that vote, or we'll let you let that piece of legislation go through without a vote.
Wow. So they have this discussion before the leaders even...
Yeah, so actually the leaders then just give that responsibility to the chief whip. Right. So the leaders don't need to, concern themselves with that because they've appointed someone they trust as chief whip. Yeah, so you don't actually vote on every single piece of legislation.
Okay.
So before we would go into the chamber, our chief whip would say to us, right, today we're voting on the Rwanda bill, for example, and we are going to vote against X, Y, and Z amendment or X, Y, and Z clause. And so we'd be in the chamber and Lindsay Hoyle, so Sir Lindsay Hoyle, who is the current Speaker of the House of Commons and was when I was in Parliament, he would say, "There's this piece of legislation. Are we going to vote on it?" And then we would have to scream aye or no. And if one...
That's it done? Is that picked up? Or you need
that's
to,
like the first part of it. So you scream aye or no.
It's great how they use Scottish phrases, eh? Aye or no.
Basically. What can I say? Scotland's the centre of the universe. So if one person screams aye, that's not sufficient. Like there has to be like a bit of a noise. Yep. So we in the SNP, for example, we'd start screaming aye or no. And then the Speaker would then be like, right, okay, there's going to be a vote. So they'd say division, clear the lobbies. And right, this is what is batshit crazy about politics in 2025. You would think in this day and age with digital being everywhere that you could just press a button and vote. No. So MPs have to go through... So no, they've kind of moved on from that, thankfully. However, we have to go through lobbies. So you have to stand up, you have to go through different lobbies and then go through those lobbies and get counted. That whole process for one vote takes around 10 to 15 minutes.
What if, can you have multiple votes in one day?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
So I remember there was times...
Get your steps in, right?
Well, 100%, but also like, it's a long day.
Yeah.
You could be up there till like 1 o'clock. And I remember, so I obviously was elected in May 2021, but if we go a few years before that, and at the Brexit time, I mean, some of my colleagues tell me stories of when they were in Parliament at ungodly hours.
Just walking around.
Walking around for divisions, because it was so contentious. And I remember the Rwanda bill. It sticks out to me because it was a horrific piece of legislation that the Conservative government at the time brought forward. And
was that about the planes taking people back or something?
People taken back to Rwanda. It was a horrific piece of legislation. And we in the SNP were very much against it, and we voted at it at whatever stage we could. But then the reality is that I think sometimes maybe the Labour Party knew that we were going to vote or they were going to win the next general election. And I think their attitude was maybe, we'll get in and we'll just repeal it.
Wow.
And I think then there's a bigger question to ask about the function of democracy. If we're going into Parliament to vote, but actually we're not always voting, what does that mean for legislation that's really contentious, like the Rwanda bill? Now, there's some bits of legislation that's not going to be contentious, that everyone's going to agree on. But, bills like Rwanda are really contentious. And I mean... it's always really interesting.
That's really interesting. And then when you're there, sorry, just a few questions on it because I find it fascinating. How long does it take to work out that process? And it's bizarre because obviously we don't see any of that. And then you're just embedded or thrown into it. And as someone who's young and, not with the sticks in terms of how the other people would have been there, did it take a bit of time understanding all that? Or do you just follow the whip's lead type of thing?
Yeah, oh my goodness. So when I was elected, I remember one of my now former colleagues saying to me, well, Anum, that's you here now. Like, we didn't have a book to tell us what to do when we were all elected. So you just have to learn it and deal with it. And the best piece of advice that was given to me was just go into the chamber. And even if you're not asking a question, just go in, because the thing is, right, Parliament is incredibly elitist. Not just in terms of who gets to be there, but in terms of the language that's used. Now, people might think you just go in and ask a question, but the reality is you get debates, you get questions, you get different types of debates, you get different types of question and answer sessions. And so the way you ask those questions or the way you speak in those debates can be different depending on what debate it was. So I remember in the first couple of weeks, I mean, I was just in Parliament, literally like from dawn till dusk, every single day, just watching everyone, like trying to work out what it was like.
Just absorb it all. Just
so
like,
if you were an MP,
Yeah.
I couldn't stand up and be like, oh, aye, so Atta said less. I'd be like, the member or the honourable member for X, Y, and Z said less. That's that aspect. But even something as simple as asking a question, right? So how do you think a question is asked in the chamber? Do you stick your hand up or what? What do you think?
My understanding would be that you put the question forward through somebody that lands with the minister or something, or then it comes back to you whether it's selected or not. I don't know.
So so there's a couple of different types of questions again. So it's so confusing. So you've got some questions that you would put into the system beforehand, and then you'll have like a follow-up question. But if you're going into a question and answer session and there's no set questions, or stuff like an urgent question, for example, or just a ministerial statement, you go into the chamber and you bob.
You bob?
You bob.
As in boxing bob?
No. So bob, not box.
Okay.
Bob. So you bob, and that means you stand up and down. So if you ever watch the House of Commons and you see everyone on the green seats, they literally are standing up and down. They're going up and down to catch the speaker's eye.
Wow.
So you
could be squatting for a while when you don't get caught.
Atta, that's happened to me. I must have had some really, really strong thighs during my time in Parliament. But my goodness, like you just spend an hour easily bobbing up and down. But then even then, they say it's not, but it 100% is done on like a system of who's been there the longest or like political party preference. So
and also choosing who's they're going to pick depending on type of question they'll ask, right?
Well, they don't know necessarily what question you're going to ask, but I think they can probably tell from who you are. But the speaker's meant to be neutral in that regard, so you shouldn't really. But what would happen is, for example, I was an SNP MP, so Tories would get preference, Labour would get preference, but then even within the SNP, I was the newest MP. So all my colleagues would get preference over me. So my goodness, you could literally spend an hour just bobbing up and down.
Wow.
Just jumping up and down. And that is how members of Parliament ask questions in the House of Commons chamber.
That has been,
by bobbing up and down.
That has been one of the best parts of DemocraTEA so far for me. Honestly, thank you so much. Whether it's an aye or a no, honestly, these are things I'll take away, the bobbing and whatever you'll do. So you're in the House of Commons, and what and how is it decided that what you're going to speak about?
This is a really interesting question. Obviously, as members of Parliament, we have our own interests. Yep. And so if I saw that there was a debate on something that I found interesting, I would jump in and ask questions or ask to speak in that debate. But the reality is that for political parties, they need that representation in the chamber. And sometimes if you've got like a debate or a question on, I don't know, say transport, for example, but the transport spokesperson who normally covers that isn't there. But sometimes you would just get a phone call from the whip saying, "Where are you?" And the mistake you would make is saying, "I'm not doing anything." You were always busy. When the whip's called, you were always busy.
Always busy. Okay.
But if the whip's called and said, "We need you for this debate," sometimes you just kind of have to drop things and then go. Okay. And more often than not, you would have a briefing paper and you'd be able to like read off that and obviously have some prep time beforehand. But there are some instances for some MPs that actually someone just needs to go into the chamber and ask a question. So you're just handed a piece of paper and you go in. That's not what happens all the time. And I don't want people thinking that majority of MPs, even the ones in political parties that I don't agree with, are people who are in the chamber asking about questions that are important to them and speaking in the debates that are important to them. Yeah. But I think there's sometimes, some of the more random debates that I did is, I remember I got asked to speak in a debate, I think it was on Mongolia, which is not a country that's ever really been on my radar, but now I have knowledge of Mongolia. And
these are such old kind of ways that we've been working, I guess, in Parliament for over the years, and then we're trying to modernise and become, be up to date with it all. And when a young person like yourself goes there, you're like, this is bizarre. I'm not fighting, I'm trying to understand the system, but yet represent my people. It must be a real difficult balancing act.
It is. And Parliament just hasn't moved forward. Those traditions, and they're very, very set on their traditions. And look, I love a good tradition. I'm from a Pakistani culture. Like, we love our traditions in the Pakistani culture. But my goodness, like, there's not really much scope for modernisation. And, the question then is, how is Parliament fit for purpose if it's not reflective of how we live our lives in 2025? The fact that one vote can take up to 15 minutes is ridiculous. Like, what a waste of time. And then, the other questions there are, who wants to be in Parliament that late? Are we making sure that single parents or young mothers or young fathers or have the ability to go and represent in Parliament,
So
because
difficult.
surely they're going to be looking at that thinking, I'd rather be at home with my kids.
Yeah, really interesting. And honestly, thank you. This is educational to me, as well as getting to know your passions and what's driven you over your career and where you're at just now. We're going to look at, mashallah, you've mentioned a number of different things about your faith and how that's important to you. Firstly, what do you think are some of the issues within our Muslim community? Because obviously we've spoke about the right wing and how the rise of Islamophobia is very evident for people. What are other issues within our communities, and how can we, I guess, as role models, as people who are in industries where we can voice our opinion, how can we support and try to really help people in their own journeys?
I think one of the biggest issues right now, and it's not the most spoken about issue, and it's not the most sexiest issue to talk about, but the big issue right now for Muslims is that there's no definition of Islamophobia at a government level. And I'm really sorry, because this is me getting really political, but I suppose with my background, I can be, and hopefully, inshallah, explain that to people.
Yeah.
So the APPG, which is the all-party parliamentary group in Parliament, so it's a cross-party group of politicians, came up with a definition of Islamophobia. We put that to political parties and they started adopting it. So the Labour Party adopted it, the Tories didn't, but the SNP adopted it. And the Scottish Tories and the Scottish Labour Party adopted it. So political parties have adopted this definition, but that's just political parties adopting it. It's not been adopted at government level. And so this is a real challenge, because we need Islamophobia entrenched and enshrined in law. Yeah. And I'm sure that the far right will pick up that sentence from me and take it for a ride and come after me. But the reality is that protections for people who are Muslim, or protections for people that look Muslim. And I mean, this is the thing, right? We talk about Islamophobia. It has been well documented that Sikh men who wear turbans have experienced Islamophobia, because some of these far-right dipshits are so thick that they don't realise that a Sikh man's not a Muslim. And at a policy level, it's really important that that's adopted, and it's really frustrating that's not been adopted at a UK government level, but also, and this is where I am happy to criticise the Scottish Government, it's not been adopted by the SNP Scottish Government. And when I was elected, I remember having meetings with government ministers on this very issue and pushing for an adoption of this, and their stance, from what I can remember, and I'm happy to be corrected, but one of the concerns that was raised was that the APPG definition isn't fully adopted by all Muslim communities. But the reality is that's not going to be adopted by all Muslim communities, because you've got Sunnis, you've got Shias, you've got Ahmadis, you've got different people in different communities. You've got people with different life experiences within the Muslim community. But overwhelmingly, there's support for this definition, and it's really frustrating that it's not been adopted. And the UK government is now looking at it again. I think it's Dominic Grieve who's looking at it, and they've actually, I mean, no, it's not. But then I suppose he's somewhat better than maybe some of the other people they could have drafted in, and you have to take a win where you can, right? But also, it was really interesting that Keir Starmer stopped using the word Islamophobia, and he started referring it to anti-Muslim hatred. And again, that's not what the APPG is calling for. We're calling for, I say we, because I was part of it, I'm obviously no longer an MP, but the APPG is calling for Islamophobia as a word to be defined and put into legislation. And that's what's happening at a UK government level. And it's also really frustrating that's not happening in the Scottish government. And I hope, if this podcast comes out, that there's some pressure. And I mean, if someone was to ask me, what can I do as a Muslim living in Scotland or living in Britain, I would say, write to your local MP, write to your local MSP and say, what are your thoughts on the APPG definition on Islamophobia? And what are you doing to lobby government to put this into law and put this into practice? Because it's going to help protect me as a Muslim whilst we're in a political period of rising far right and rising Islamophobia.
And again, I really like that and value that advice you're saying, right, and lobby. But again, Anum, let's be honest, see, for your normal community member, they're not going to write or lobby as much as we'd like them to. So let's be clear about that. So, you know what, they've got challenges around that definition. I like that, and that's very political, and we've got that point across. what are the other challenges for our youth and our communities? Because I see social media on the rise. It's really worrying in the sense that, listen, I've got 2 young kids, and you want to try to give them everything that you can. With this cost of living crisis, all of this kind of bolts on to different things. Do you know what I mean? So where are we at as a community, as Muslims, but also as Scottish people, to really try to make our mark in whatever we're doing? You know, how can we come out of this? What advice would you give us around some of that?
Oh my goodness, so I'm going to give a very, very niche answer, but I think that's very on brand for me. I think one of the big issues that we're facing in the Muslim community is misogyny and sexism towards women. And I would argue that's been the case for a while. But that is at odds, I would argue, with my faith. I think that Islam is an inherently feminist faith. And actually, if you think about it, the first Muslim CEO was, of course, Khadija.
Yeah.
She was the first Muslim CEO. But we don't talk about that.
Don't celebrate that.
We don't celebrate it. And it's incredibly frustrating. But I would say sexism and misogyny, and that manifests itself now in 2025 in different ways. And one of the frustrating things for me is when I scroll on TikTok and Instagram, and I joke about this all the time, I'm chronically online. So when I'm scrolling on TikTok, it's incredibly easy to come across that misogynistic content. That's not necessarily Muslim men simply against Muslim women, but it's actually men in general against Muslim women, especially if they're visibly Muslim. Yeah. And that's a challenge that we really face. And I mean, I've been in circumstances where obviously I was a member of parliament when I was elected at the age of 28. So I was relatively young. I mean, yeah, I was really young. And I would like to think that my skincare regime means that I don't look that old.
Not at all.
But I mean, honestly, see the grey hairs, they're horrendous. I was actually looking at my grey hairs this morning and thinking, Anum, what are you doing? But what was I saying?
You were talking about misogyny and sexism.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry.
And how you scroll through stuff and you're finding all that.
So scrolling through social media, it's really easy to come across that misogynistic content. And I've experienced that where I walked into rooms and people would look at me and just assume that I was a staff member. And I'd have to explain, no, actually, I'm the member of parliament. Or I remember, I've never spoken about this publicly, but I just think it's so funny, where once I was in Parliament and a bunch of school kids from Airdrie had come down to London and they were getting a tour of Parliament, and my tours were terrible. And honestly, I used to just make up half the stuff I was going around. No, I didn't make it up. I didn't make it up. But there's a tour for school kids, and the tour guide was from the Houses of Parliament, and he turned around and he was like, oh, so this is like the pigeonholes where MPs get all their letters. And they was like, oh, so what's your MPs? And the kids were like, we don't know. And then the teacher's like, oh, it's a person called Anum Qaisar. And the tour guide turned around and goes, oh, Mr. Qaisar's pigeonhole must be here somewhere. So it's that automatic assumption, that I was an MP, so I had to be a man.
I know.
And,
crazy.
You know, it was so frustrating. And then obviously when some people seen that I was an Asian woman, I was relatively young, that I was a Muslim woman, or that I would walk in with my lashes and my high heels and my hair curled, they would be taken aback. And I suppose that's misogyny. And that's sexism, isn't it?
Absolutely.
That you just...
You just can't be who you are and how you want to express yourself. There's this kind of preconceived notion of what an Asian woman looks like, and that doesn't make sense to me, or what a Muslim woman looks like. And, you know, some comments that were made to me is, oh, you're very liberal for a Muslim woman. Like, what does that mean? I know. And
you're very confident as a Muslim woman. What does that mean?
Exactly. They're giving you a compliment, but really taking it away straight away with a negative, you know, by saying that. So, you know, we spoke about the youth visiting Parliament and not understanding or being misogynistic and sexist. Our youth, because I do a lot of work in youth development, and I'm just finding that they have a lack of role models similar to the way we had, even though people like you and I are trying to do the right things. Do you think our youth and communities are wanting, you know, money quick? Do you think, because is that a problem in our communities around, you know, really trying to work and have that ethic and values, that the principles that your grand instilled in you? I see it missing, sadly, in a lot of those communities. And the ones who are affluent and doing really well, mashallah, they are getting involved. But what about the big masses that are being missed?
Yeah.
How can we support some of that and nurture some of their talent?
Yeah. So my controversial take on this, and it might again be cancelled, is I think we have got into this kind of period where maybe some of the younger generation, not all, some of the younger generation want to like kind of get rich quick. And you've got people on social media that portray this really glamorous life. And maybe I'm part of the problem because I share some of my life on social media, but also I'm 32 years old and I'm able to take a step back and know that when people are sharing their life on social media, they are sharing a very small part of their life. And in fact, I often laugh. I think people think I have this like really cool life and loads of friends. Atta, I have like 4 friends. I know lots of people, but I literally have 4 friends that I will see. Other than that,
They'll be watching this just now.
Yeah. I know those 4 will know who they are, and other people will be like, am I one of those 4? But no, and I think we're in this scenario where social media has just taken over exponentially. It's taken over people's life, and we're talking about the younger generation. I think it's definitely talking about the older generation. It impacts them as well. And so one of the challenges is actually just challenging that and constantly saying, you know, yes, but you know, that's not really life. And you know, it's really funny because I don't know if you've heard the news, but there's a new tiramisu place opening in Glasgow.
Oh, God.
And honestly, right, so I'm obsessed with tiramisu.
Okay.
Like, see if I could eat this.
That'd be it. That's
day.
all you would eat.
But you know what? I see part of my dua that I make on a daily basis is that Allah grants me with a long, happy, healthy life, Ameen.
With tiramisu.
And protects us all, yeah. But also, no, that I'm granted Jannat al-Firdaus, Ameen. And then when I'm in Jannah, inshallah, I am given as much tiramisu as I possibly want. And I eat it all without putting any weight on, without feeling sick. Sorry, how did we get onto tiramisu?
I have no idea, but you talked about a new place that's opening up in Glasgow. Yes.
So yes, that's what I was saying. So a new place in Glasgow's opened up, and fun fact, it's not got alcohol, so it's halal.
Yep.
Don't tell Nigel Farage. And so I posted that, oh yeah, this place is opening. And then actually I was thinking, the last time I had tiramisu that was quite nice was in a place in London. And I posted afterwards a picture of me looking all nice and with some lasagna. And I think last night in particular, I was like, well, I posted this picture. People might think, oh, she went for this nice dinner, blah, blah, blah. What they don't know is that, see, during that day, I had recorded multiple episodes of the podcast.
No.
I had multiple breakdowns.
Yes.
I had cried. And when me and my friend, who's one of those 4 friends, were going to go out for dinner, I turned around to her and I was like, I can't be bothered. I was like, let's just go back to the hotel, get some takeaway.
Get our jammies on.
Yeah, get our jammies, order an a Pepe's
and some tiramisu.
And just chill. And she was like, no. And I'm like, I think you should go out. I think we should go out.
Yeah.
It'll make you feel better. And then I shared that actually, like, oh, actually, do you know the last time I had tiramisu, or when I took this picture, I suppose I was humanizing it to a level, because again, I understand and appreciate that I'm probably part of this problem, but I show only certain aspects of my life. I don't show the hard graft. I don't show the slogs. I don't show the blood, sweat and tears. And my goodness, there's lots of tears. But I show a certain part of my life. And I was like, actually, I need to make a more conscious effort to humanize it a little bit more, because exactly like we say, I am so scared for this future generation who don't maybe have the critical thinking skills or the analytical skills in this digital age to be able to pull apart what they're seeing online and understand that that's just one part or a very small snippet of someone's life.
Okay, I love that. Listen, there's just so much interest and knowledge there I'm learning from, but also really liking to tease out of you as well. What's next for Anum? Like, you've got this DemocraTEA podcast, which is excellent in terms of the guests you've got in. I've even had a takeover today, which I'm loving.
Yeah.
What is next, inshallah? What would you like to do? Because you've got the motivation, you've got the drive, alhamdulillah, you've made contacts and networks, and that's what life's all about. And I totally vouch by that. Where do you see yourself going? Is there a plan?
I think I would love for the podcast to keep going.
Yeah.
Straight off the bat, like that's the big thing for me. Whether or not people listen or watch, I don't know, and inshallah they will. But I don't want it to go off just for kind of ego reasons. I wanted to go off because I just don't feel like there's much space where Muslims or people of colour are talking about their lived experiences on this kind of platform. And
being open and transparent as you are, yes.
And I mean, I love podcasts. And I mean, I love, people are going to judge me for saying this, but I love The Only Way is Politics.
Yeah.
So with Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart. And
who cares if people judge you?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. People are going to judge me regardless. But even when I listened to their podcasts, I didn't always feel like they were reflective of the communities that I'm from. And I think for me, alhamdulillah, like I'm very aware of what I've done in life and the privileges that I hold because of that. And I don't know whether that's power or influence, but even I just feel like if I'm putting things out there constantly, inshallah, there'll be something, or at least if there's one episode that resonates with someone, even if there's one episode that resonates with someone, might not be this one, but if,
bloody better be.
but if there is one, then, alhamdulillah, then that's the point, isn't it? That's what we're doing, right?
That's it. That's what we're doing. That's how we're doing it, and this is why you're here.
So the podcast stuff is really, really important to me. I've got a couple of other projects that I'm working on, and inshallah they come to fruition. We'll see if that happens. But also see what I'm also doing. Really rogue is I do reformer Pilates multiple times a week. Wow. And that very specifically. Is that
the ones with the kind of machine that you...
Yeah. Yes. Oh my God, it's so hard. It's so hard. But I'm doing it very, very consciously for one reason and one reason alone is that to build core body strength. Okay. Right. So I'm 33, right? But actually I'm an old buddhi. And for anyone that doesn't understand Punjabi, that means I'm an old lady. Like, honestly, like, my bones are broken, man. Like, I'm so old. Honestly, I wake up in the morning and my knees are cracking, my shoulders cracking.
Your back takes a bit of time to adjust.
Oh my God, my back is constantly sore. And I'm very conscious of the fact that because I'm from a South Asian background, I'm a woman, we don't have like that kind of bone strength, and we're not being taught to have that bone strength from a young age. And so that's like a conscious effort that I'm making. And so anytime I have a conversation with any woman, I'm like, do reformer Pilates. It's spenny, but it's really, really good.
I'm putting down Pilates teacher as another career option for you as well.
Do you know what? I would love to do that, but I am simply not strong enough. Simply not strong enough to be a Pilates
I'm sure
teacher.
The strength you've shown in your life, carry that through in your exercise, and inshallah all will be well. I've got some fun questions for you. Some of them are a bit random, but they're all safe, so we can say them. What is your favourite meal?
Oh, I'm really desi.
Go for it.
I'm
Desi's
really
good.
desi.
Desi's good.
So do you know the salan that we call affectionately curry?
Yes.
So I
got
think
pakora in it.
Yeah, so it's like pakora and it's like a yogurt base. Oh my goodness, Atta, that is...
Do you have a naan? Do you have a roti?
I'm salivating just thinking about it.
With roti or naan?
Roti. Oh,
okay.
See, curry and roti. But then on the opposite side, I absolutely love Italian food.
Okay.
Basically, I like carbs. That's it.
Yep. Can't beat carbs, eh? Carbs is always good. What could you not do without? What does Anum always need with her, or something that she has to have? See, you weren't expecting that, were you?
No, I wasn't. What do I always need? My lipstick. So it's a very specific shade. And actually, if anyone's watching and has any lipstick recommendations, please give them to me, because I have this really bad habit. I have this very specific one shade of lipstick that I use. Okay.
And do you have them in multiple batches, or because if you lose one, you're done for, right?
I have loads of them, and I have like one in each bag. And it's really bad because I've got so many lipsticks of different colours, but I just don't use them. I always stick to this one because I know this is the shade that I like.
Love it.
So that is what you'll always find on me. Okay.
What celebrity, living or not living, would you have liked to hang out with?
I'm going to out myself as a Martin Compston fan.
Oh,
but, oh my goodness. I absolutely love Martin Compston. He is such an amazing actor.
MC.
Yeah.
God, I want to name drop him. I want to name drop him and say I messaged him the other day.
Please.
I messaged him the other day.
All right, check you out.
Martin's a lovely man. He's doing super well.
Also a Nat. Or he supports, I don't know if he's a SNP member or supporter, but he supports independence. So obviously he's a man of good taste.
Yeah, good choice.
If I could choose someone else, I'm going to be really, really cheeky and choose someone else.
Go for it.
It's my podcast, so I can do what I want. The other person is Jacinda Ardern. Yes. So she's the former Prime Minister of New Zealand. And I think she is just fascinating. She's so interesting, and
Yeah.
I'm so gutted because she was in Scotland recently,
Oh, no.
but I was in London at the time.
What was she doing here?
So she has a documentary that's just come out about her time as Prime Minister. And it's really interesting because I think the cameras were actually with her while she was Prime Minister. So it's a documentary about that time, and I think, it was just fascinating.
Superb.
She's amazing.
No, two good choices. One piece of advice you would give to young people?
Ooh. I actually ask this to other people, but I've not thought of it. I think it's a bit of a weird one, but I would say know what your capacity is and know what your boundaries are. People will say to you, get involved in politics, stand for election. But it's a tough gig, man. Like, there's a lot of abuse, and when you're Muslim or you're a person of colour, that's increased significantly, and when you're a woman, that's increased significantly. We know it's documented largely how much abuse female politicians receive in comparison to male politicians. So get involved in politics, but also know, you don't have to stand as an MP. You don't have to stand as an MSP or a councillor to make meaningful change. Sure. And in fact, there's loads of other ways. And the thing I always talk about is, yes, we need people of colour, frontline politicians, but actually what we also need is people of colour in the green rooms, and the podcast studios, and the rooms where special advisors are, as journalists, and the people in corridors of power. We need people in every part of society, and before the far right come after me, and if they do, they're more than welcome to. I don't really care. But it's actually really important that those who are making policies or reporting on policies are reflective of the Scottish and the British communities. Because if you have rooms where everyone looks like each other, then there's not going to be that space for that nuanced debate around what impact policy is going to have. So yes, get involved in politics, but you don't always have to stand as a politician. There's so many other things that you can do.
I like that.
And I think it's really important.
Yeah, no, listen, I do some work in sport, as you know, and that resonates with me around, get involved in sport in some capacity, and all those different types of careers within it is so valued. Thank you.
And we don't have that conversation enough.
No.
I think we always see, and maybe this is part of being part of the Pakistani culture, I'm unsure, but it's be the top person, that person, front facing, public face. But you don't always have to have that, and meaningful change and pushing for meaningful change can come in so many different forms. Yeah.
Thank you. Great bit of advice for any young person listening in or watching DemocraTEA. The last but not least is, tell me a quote that grounds you.
So this actually used to be my bio for my private Instagram, and I just think it resonates with me so much, and it's something that I think about quite often. It's from a movie, so I don't know if it can be attributed to anyone in particular, but it's, society grows great when old men plant trees in whose shade they shall never sit. Now, bear with me, what does that mean? It means as a society, we will flourish when people will make decisions or do things when they're not going to necessarily benefit from that, but they have the forward-thinking ability to see that in the future, someone else will benefit from that.
Love it.
And I think for me, that's really, really important, because there's some policies that I've argued for. So, for example, alhamdulillah, that I don't have children, for example. So, the Scottish Child Payment isn't going to impact me. But I was hugely supportive of that payment and of that policy, because that has an impact, and a real tangible impact on other people. Absolutely. I also think kind of post-COVID, I don't know if this is a controversial take or something, but I think kind of post-COVID, people seem to be more insular. And actually, society does flourish and it grows great when we all kind of muck in together and do things for the benefit of others, and we're not necessarily going to benefit from that.
Love it. Thank you so much. What a lovely way to end DemocraTEA.
Thank you so much. It felt so weird, by the way, to give up that power and have you in the have me in the hot seat. But no, thank you so much.
So in today's conversation, we have learned so much on DemocraTEA about Anum that is personal, and I thank you for that openness, Anum. Honestly, it's meant a lot. We have reflected on Anum's belief that politics does not begin in parliaments. It begins in homes, relationships, faith, culture, and the quiet compromises people make to belong. What I have loved is Anum has brought her whole self to the mic, a practicing Muslim who speaks about faith as sustenance rather than a spectacle, a Scottish Pakistani woman who refuses to choose between identities, a former MP who understands both the seduction and the emptiness of power. Thank you, Anum, for being so honest with us.